Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars. Topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
All right, guys, welcome to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Foreman, and I have a lot of cool information for you guys today, a lot of rankings and stuff for you guys today, but, either way, a very cool show. I want to start out by talking, about Russell Westbrook, where he was ranked on Bleacher Report's top 100 players this season. I also want to talk about LeBron James, where he ranked on, Kenny the Jet Smith's, the NBA analyst. I want to talk about where LeBron landed on his all-time list, or where he is on his all-time list. I also want to take a look into this year's NBA free agency, which is probably set to start around the end of October, middle to end of October. And then at the very end of the show, make sure you stick around to the very last segment, because I want to talk about my top players at each position, okay? I'll probably give you guys 3 or so players at each position, so don't go anywhere. Stick around until the very end of the show. But like I said, I want to talk about Russell Westbrook, where he landed on Bleacher Report's top 100 players this season. Okay, so if I haven't already said it, Bleacher Report ranked Russell Westbrook 22nd out of 100 players, the top 100, best players this season. Russell Westbrook was ranked at 22nd. Okay, so he's the 22nd best player according to Bleacher Report. Let's talk about why maybe they put him on this list, so low or so high. A lot of people don't think, a lot of people think, he's a lot better than the 22nd player in the NBA. So let's talk about why maybe they put him at this spot, if I think he deserves to be at that spot, and where, in fact, I believe he does belong. Yes, I don't think he is the 22nd best player in the league. So let's talk about Russell, his game. So this season alone, he's averaging 27 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists on 47% field goal, okay, from shooting from the floor. Only 25, around 25, 26% from the three, so he's not shooting a very high clip from the three at all. One of his worst years from the 3-point line. So not shooting a high clip from the 3-point line, probably because of all the 3-point shots he's taking. He's had to take this year. In that Houston Rockets system, a system that takes a whole lot of 3-pointers. He's obviously taking more threes than he's ever taken before. And, the percentages show it's not necessarily the biggest part of his game, and we see why now. But either way, 27 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists. He's 7th in scoring this year. 4th in triple-doubles. All you people who love the triple-double stat probably love Russell Westbrook as well. We saw him for 2 straight years average a triple-double and get a MVP award while doing that. Very deserving of that award. But like I said, 7th in scoring this year, 4th in triple-doubles. He's also 12th in assists, averaging 7.5 assists per game. That shows you how many great passers are in the NBA, because at 7 assists, he's only 12th. Almost in that top 10, but not quite. Either way, 12th in assists is a pretty hard thing to do. He's 20th in rebounds, again, as a point guard, averaging 8.5 rebounds about. So, a 6'3" point guard who's 20th in the league in rebounding when there are definitely more than 20 centers and power forwards in this league. Russell Westbrook's getting more rebounds than half of them. So, props to him. He's doing it all over. He's doing it, he's scoring the ball, assisting, he's grabbing rebounds. It's also his first season in Houston, and I do think that should not be something that is understated. He's spent basically a decade or so in OKC, and after moving to a different market, a new system with new teammates, a new co-star, that takes some time to mesh, to figure out. And him being in his first years that still averaged 27, 8, and 7 in a new system, like I said, new coach, new environment, that's a tough thing to do that should not be understated or undervalued. That should be something that is propped up and valued more than it is being right now, for sure. So first season in Houston, he's all the things I just listed, 7th in scoring, 4th in triple-doubles. However, he's ranked 22nd overall. Not something I really agree with. If you've been listening to my podcast or my episodes here on GSMC, on my first episode here, I gave you guys my top 10 players. I don't want to tell you if he was on that or not, but that's a true testament to see who's been listening or not. But ranked 22nd, not something I agree with by any means. Let's talk about the list itself and where some other people land on this list. So to give you guys some retrospect, some perspective on the matter, Kyle Lowry this season averaging 19 points, 7 assists, 5 rebounds on 40% shooting. Obviously, yes, the point guard of the Toronto Raptors, second in the Eastern Conference. One of the better offensive and defensive teams this year for sure. Kyle Lowry was ranked 20th on this list, 2 spots ahead of Russell Westbrook. Sorry. So Kyle Lowry was ranked ahead of Westbrook this season, basically saying he was a better player this season. Like I said, 19.7 rebounds, 7 assists, 5 rebounds, 40% from the floor. Not necessarily the stats Westbrook is averaging this year, but okay. That's Kyle Lowry. Kyrie, who has played 20 games in total this season, and only 20 games, has played very well, averaging, I believe, 26, 27 points, so playing very well in the games he's played in, yes. But again, only 20 games, and he's ranked 19th. Is availability important, okay? He's ranked 19th, 3 spots ahead of Russell Westbrook, who's played the entire season, I believe. I don't know if he's missed any games. I highly doubt he's missed any games. So, Kyrie, Kyle Lowry, 2 guys who are both ahead of Westbrook. Rudy Gobert. Big fan of Rudy Gobert, what he does for the Utah Jazz. Defensive Player of the Year winner. Very deserving of that. However, Rudy Gobert, 18th on this list. 4 spots ahead of Russell Westbrook. This year, Rudy Gobert is averaging 15 points, 13 rebounds, 2 blocks. Yes, impressive season. I believe a career high in points for Rudy. So props to him. A good season, great season for him. Definitely 4 spots. Is it better than Russell Westbrook? However, 4 spots even. I'm not sure. Rudy is a guy who I'm not going to fight too hard on you this season. He's averaging a great season for himself. Paul George, a guy who has been in and out of the Clipper lineup this season, okay, was ranked 16th on this list. 6 spots ahead of Russell Westbrook, okay? Sorry. So, yeah, Paul George, 6 spots ahead of Russell Westbrook this year, averaging 21 points, 4 assists, 5 rebounds. In my opinion, it's been somewhat of an off year for Paul George. Hasn't necessarily, been at full stride. Hasn't played up to the performances that we saw him do. How we saw him play last year, and obviously high up in the MVP voting as well as defensive player voting. So Paul George was playing very well last season, not quite this season, not as good. However, we still see him getting ranked, higher or lower, however you want to say, than Russell Westbrook. He's ranked a better player this season than Russell Westbrook. Again, 27 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists, 47% from the field. Jason Tatum. And if you've been listening, especially on my most recent one, you know Jason Tatum is a guy I am very high on. I think the ceiling is very high for him. He's one of the league's, best up-and-coming players. Not a guy who I undervalue or underestimate. But not a guy I also overvalue or want to overvalue, okay? He is in his third season in the NBA. Averaging 23 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, 44% from the field from the floor. He's been a huge part, to the Celtics' success. Haven't done too well this season, the Celtics, but he's been the biggest part to them and the success they've had. He is really starting to blossom, like I've said, into an up and coming guy. Not a guy you want to undervalue, but is he better than? Has he had a better season than Russell Westbrook? No, in my opinion. At 23 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists. All of those under where Russell is averaging. 27, 8, and 7. 47 from the floor, so better than Tatum from the floor as well. Not as good from the free throw line, not as good from the three-point line, but the Rockets and the Celtics close in record as well, so I don't see the huge gap in Tatum and Westbrook this year, especially with Westbrook, again, his first season in Houston. Another guy in the biggest issue that I have to have with this list is that Chris Middleton, a guy I am not very high on whatsoever, not a guy I call a second star for Giannis, not a more of a complimentary piece in my opinion. He was ranked 10th on the list this season. He's ranked the 10th best player in the NBA this season. 21 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, basically 50% from the field. A very good season, yes. An all-star level season in some years, yes. The 10th best, the 22nd best player was averaging 27, 8, and 7, when the 10th best is averaging 21, 6, and 4. Yes, he's shooting better percentages. Maybe he is on the better team in the Bucks. Maybe that's why him being on the better team, arguably the best team in the NBA, where they're ranked right now, is that why we see him being, 10th on this list all season? Are they just hyping up that Bucks roster even more before the playoffs start? I'm not sure. I don't see 10th overall by any means. That means Chris Middleton has played better than, like I said, Russell Westbrook, Jason Tatum, lots of other players I'm missing on this list, but I don't agree with that. I don't think he's the 10th best player this season, let alone in the league today. So I don't agree with that. That's my biggest issue, having him at 10th and then Russell Westbrook all the way up at 22nd. Their reasoning for Russell being so high up, like obviously 22nd. Was the first part of the season. They said, don't forget the first part of the season. He apparently in January he was on pace to shoot the worst percentage of his career. He fixed that with the trade of Capella. He's getting to the rim more than ever, and his percentages went up. By himself, with the games James Harden's missed, that was another knock on him. He lost to other teams by 4.5 points, I believe, when they were the better ranked team or something. So they lost games they probably should have when it was just Russell Westbrook. They also said his inconsistency throughout the season has been, insane. They can't put him higher up on the list with how inconsistent he has been. When you think of Chris Middleton, the first thing I think of is how he averaged no more than 12 points, 13 points the last 4 games in the Toronto series last year. Talk about inconsistent, so I can't. Yes, Russell can be up and down in his percentages, but to say his inconsistency is the biggest part of him being the 22nd best player, where Chris Middleton is the 10th best this season, I disagree with the rank. I disagree with some people's other people's ranking on this list, like a Chris Middleton and a Jason Tatum, again being ahead of Russell Westbrook. In my opinion, if you've listened, again, like I said earlier, if you've listened to my prior podcast, I do believe Russell Westbrook is a top 10 player in the NBA today. I think he's top 10. I cannot name you 10, 11, 12 players better than Russell Westbrook, and that includes players this year, playing this year, the rate players are playing at this year. I can't name you 10, 12 players playing better than Russell Westbrook. The fact that he was 22nd, again, I do not agree with that whatsoever. I have to disagree. But, Bleacher Report, I don't want to say anything disrespectful or anything like that. I simply disagree with what they put. I think Russell Westbrook deserves more than 22nd overall. I think he's better than the players that I've listed, at least right now. I know Russell Westbrook disagrees, seeing his comments. I think it was on, I don't know if it was on Twitter or Instagram, but it was basically just him laughing, ha ha ha, a whole bunch. That lines and lines of ha ha ha, him laughing basically at him being ranked 22nd to Chris Middleton at 10, Jason Tatum at 11. Those were the highlights that it showed, him laughing at those results. I don't think he necessarily cares too much. Maybe he does a little bit, showing, with the comment on it, he does in fact care a little bit possibly. I'm on his side. I think he's getting a little bit of disrespected on the 22nd rank. Or him being ranked at 22nd. I know he disagrees with the comment that he made, and again, it's his first season away from Oklahoma City in Houston, something that should not be understated or undervalued. It takes time for players to mesh in a new system, especially with a guy like Russell Westbrook in the system. In the Houston Rockets, a whole lot of volume shooting, and Russell not necessarily being a deep volume shooter. Obviously it's going to take time for him to get used to that system, to get, into full stride. And I think now he's somewhat coming into terms with that, getting used to the game plan and everything, and I think him seeing these rankings is going to do nothing but put an edge, a chip on his shoulder. So watch out for Russell and the Rockets when, the NBA comes back July 30th. Again, I'm just sitting back waiting for the NBA to come back. I cannot wait. And, storylines like this makes me nothing but more excited to see the players come out, again, with even bigger chips on their shoulders. So, props to Russell Westbrook for being the bigger man, kind of laughing it off. Don't agree with the rankings. I think he should be at least in the top 10, top 12. That's what I think. Let me know what you guys think. I'm thinking about posting a poll on Twitter, so go and check that out. But as far as for this segment, I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, okay, I want to talk about another person, in LeBron James and where he ranks on Kenny Smith's all-time list. Don't miss it. I'll be right back.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back, guys. This is the GSMC Basketball Podcast. I'm still Casey Foreman, your host. Like I said before the break, I want to talk about Kenny the Jet Smith, the NBA analyst on, NBA on TNT. He does a great job with Shaq, Ernie, Chuck. So I love Kenny, what he does. I'm going to get that out of the way right now. But he came out on the Load Management Podcast, and they basically asked him, or they said, they knew LeBron wasn't on his top 5. Kenny then said, LeBron is not on my top 5. He's not in my top 5 all time. He is in my top 10. He's 10th. He's probably 10th all time, Kenny said. So Kenny then ranked LeBron 10th all time. As far as his top 10, he didn't give necessarily like he's number one, he's number two. Obviously, you're inclined to think Michael Jordan's number one, Magic is up, players like that. So we're inclined to think who's number one and who's up there on his list. But he did in fact give us a couple of names. But what I want to do with this topic, I want to talk about Kenny's comments in particular, my opinion on those comments, where in fact I would put LeBron James on my top 10 list, and just, a little bit of LeBron James himself. So that's what I'm going to talk about right now. Let's get into Kenny and his comments again. So it was on the Load Management podcast. Again, ranked LeBron not in his top 5, but in his top 10, and put him at the end of it at number 10. He has, just to give you guys some more, perspective and on the situation, some more information on the situation. He has Shaq, she says, yes, Shaq's in my top 10. So, if LeBron's 10th, he thinks, obviously, Shaq is a better all-time than LeBron. So, he has Shaq in his top 10. Magic is in his top 10. I understand that as well. Magic, one of the all-time players, best point guard of all time in my opinion. So I completely understand, that perspective. Shaq, one of the most dominant players the NBA has ever seen. So I understand the Shaq perspective and argument as well. I completely get that. He also listed Larry Bird on there. Players also in his top 10, also obviously above LeBron. So, Larry Legend, Larry Magic, I completely understand and get that opinion as well. What Larry did for the Celtics, and all time he's established himself as an all time, no doubt. I think in pretty much everybody's top 5, top 10, you can see a Larry Bird. So I understand Larry as well. He listed players like Oscar Robertson and Nate Archibald as well. So those are players where I have more leeway saying, I agree more with like like I said, I have more leeway with the Magic, Larry Bird, Shaq being better than LeBron than like Oscar Robertson and Nate Archibald or, Tiny Archibald. So, not to knock, Oscar in any way. He's a career 25, 7 rebound, 9.5 assist guy, won MVPs, won a championship. So props to him. Definitely an all-time player. A lot of people have them in their top 10. I comfortably, I'm very comfortable in putting him in my top 12, top 10-ish. I haven't made a top 10 quite. I'm going to save that for a rainy day. But I understand, like I said, the Magic, Larry, and Shaq. Just Oscar, LeBron does average more points, rebounds, or just not more assists, has more championships. But, no disrespect to Oscar Robertson, the triple-double before Russell Westbrook. So props to him, and I understand where Kenny's coming from, where he says Oscar Robertson. So I understand that as well. But, the biggest name that he listed that I take issue with is a guy like, Nate or Tiny Archibald, a career 18.7 assists guy. However, I'm not comfortable. I can't really let that one slide. The others, you like your era. I completely understand that, respect to your era. Everyone has their era. However, I can't say a Nate Archibald is better or in the same talks with LeBron James. So that's the only guy no disrespect to him. It's just the greatness of LeBron. I think that should be appreciated a little more. You shouldn't just throw anybody's name, I think, with a guy like LeBron James, I love to know what you guys think about that. I'm not a LeBron James, fanboy as well. I want to get that out there because I'll talk about it in a second. I'll save that for a little bit later in this segment. But he also, another guy that didn't make the top 10, again for Kenny, is Kobe Bryant. Kobe, he says, just grazes the top 10, as does LeBron, but is outside of it. He can't put him ahead of the players that I just named. Magic, Larry, Oscar Robertson, Shaq, even maybe a Nate Archibald. So we can't put Kobe and LeBron ahead of those guys because, okay, get this. This is, again, I don't mean any disrespect here. He played in the NBA. He's an NBA analyst. Very, lots of stuff under his belt. Very experienced analyst in the NBA. However, the biggest thing also I take issue with is that, he says the biggest reason LeBron and Kobe aren't higher up on his list is because it's so easy to score nowadays. It's so easy to score, so he's basically taking it away from LeBron and Kobe all the time because of their era and it being so easy to score. I gotta disagree. I don't think it's easiest or the easiest ever to score. So I disagree with both statements of his rank with LeBron and with his statement of it being the easiest ever to score. Yes, the floor is as wide open as ever, and maybe it's easier than ever to get to the paint, get to the rim. I'll give you that. Okay, it is easier than ever, again, with everyone being out at the 3-point line. It is easier to get to the rim, get past the defender, since you have him sucked out so far away from the rim. Usually you can do something to get past him. It's easier to get to the rim, yes. But, like I said earlier, everyone has their era. Everyone seems to think their era is the best era. Okay, the older people tend to think it was, their era. Some people think it's like the 60s, 70s. A lot of people who are, infatuated with the Michael Jordan era, 80s and 90s. And nowadays people like myself, LeBron era, Kobe era, the 2000s, 2010s. So everyone has their era. Everyone has their respected era. I don't want to knock anybody's era. Or say any era is necessarily better than any other era, or take anything away from anything in the NBA, okay, or any other era. But, in my opinion, today's NBA, it's not the easiest to score. It looks like it's the easiest to score because it's some of the best players, some of the best talent we've ever seen come together. Again, this is all in my opinion, but I think today's NBA is some of the best basketball we have ever seen and some of the best talent that has ever played together or played against each other in the NBA. And you can say, it's the easiest you can score, or it's the easiest to score now than it ever has been. You can say that. I can look at, the all-time points, in a single game record. I'll look at that, all-time points in a single game. Look at the top 10. I saw someone else do this as well. Top 10. Only two in the last 20 or 15 years. Two of the last 15 years, in the top 10 all-time scoring games, only two of them have occurred in the last 15 years. So if it's the easiest to score ever, why haven't we seen more and more of these 100-point games or 80, 70, 90-point games? If it's the easiest to score, why haven't we seen that? So that's my first question. Why aren't the stats insane right now with points per game and like I said, overall points in a game? So that's one thing I disagree with, and I think the stats would point to that if it was in fact the easiest to score ever. Like I said, I think it's simply, some of the best basketball in the best league we might have ever seen, okay? Everyone nowadays, it seems like everyone almost nowadays can hit an outside jump shot, okay? It seems like more than ever, players are switching on defense, and we're seeing more and more of these 3-and-D type players who can do it on the offensive side as well as the defensive side. Yes, the defensive rules are much different. You can't grab, and it's not as physical. Yes, if you think physicality is the biggest factor of basketball, I would also argue to that because I don't think it's a physical game. I think it's more of a skill and physique type game, rather than a physical. Or not physique, a skill and flashy type game when compared to a physical type game like football. So No, I wouldn't call the NBA. If you think because it's the least physical as ever, if that takes anything away from it, sure, you can take that away. But players are switching, players are shooting more than ever, players are like I said, switching more than ever. We see more defensive. You can think they're not playing defense, but that shows you how good of offensive players we have in today's league. They are playing defense. They're switching more than ever, throwing multiple guys at different offensive plays. And yeah. Today's NBA is some of the best basketball we've seen. Like I said, players are switching and shooting and handling the ball, better, not better than we've ever seen, but it's close to being better than we've ever seen. And like, to close on my statements on Kenny, I do disagree with him. I understand where he comes from because of his era. Everyone, like I said, has their era and thinks and kind of glorifies, their era. So I understand what he's doing. I think everyone tends to do that. But to me, LeBron James has got to be this first or second best player, on that top 10. He's number 2 or number 1 on that top 10. In my opinion, the only player that I am not necessarily going to argue you with is Michael Jordan at that number 1, number 2 spot. Okay, that's the only player that I discuss LeBron James with. Michael Jordan, LeBron James, those two guys are pretty much in a category of their own, in my opinion. I would take him over the players, Kenny listed like Shaq and Larry Bird and Oscar Robertson. I would take LeBron over those players. Like I said, I understand where Kenny's coming from. But just to end on a good note, talking about LeBron, 27, 7 and 7 and 50% from the floor for his career. So 27, 7 and 7. He's a 3-time champ, 3-time champion, 3-time Finals MVP, 4-time regular season MVP, 16-time NBA All-Star, third all-time in points, total points, and 8th in total assists. All that added up, I think it's at least a top 10 NBA player. I'm happy he did crack Kenny's top 10 finally, so props for Kenny for putting LeBron in his top 10. Hasn't quite made it to the top 5 yet. We'll see what this season, what he can do, finishing out the season, if that can propel him in a lot of people's all-time lists. Maybe we see Kenny put him in that top 5. Maybe he adds another regular season MVP as well as a ring and a finals MVP. So let's see what he can do. He might not add anything to his resume this offseason. Don't want to overhype it too much. But yeah, things are coming for LeBron possibly. I think he solidified himself as at least, a top 5 player. And like I said, I think he's a number 1 or number 2 best player of all time. I'm happy he cracked the top 10 for Kenny the Jet Smith. But yeah, I'm going to take a quick break and look. When I come back, I want to look into this year's NBA free agency and, see what that might look like. Some of the, best players and for the best player coming out of that free agency, I want to talk about his decision, and what that might do to the entire league. So don't go away. I'll be right back.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back, guys. Like I said before the break, I want to take a look into this year's NBA free agency and talk about some of the best possible players and where they just might land. But with this season being delayed and obviously next season being delayed, free agency will not begin until October 18th, 2020. So after the NBA Finals and the postseason has concurred and we have our champion, a couple weeks after that we'll get the NBA free agency. And I don't want to overhype this year's free agency for you guys, because it is not last year's huge free agent market. So don't expect any huge blockbuster moves like we did last season. Before we talk about this season, let's talk a little bit about last year's and all the moves that happened. So obviously we see KD leave the Warriors, go to the Brooklyn Nets. Kyrie leaves the Celtics, joins KD on the Brooklyn Nets. We see Kawhi leaving Toronto, almost leaving the Lakers high and dry, joins the Los Angeles Clippers. We see Jimmy Butler leaving the young 76ers for, a grit and grind tough team in Miami. And we see Kemba Walker moving, from the small market Hornets to the big market Boston Celtics. So lots of big moves last season, lots of big names moving, from market to market. So, again, don't expect anything quite as big as last season, but don't think this free agency is just going to be, a bump in the road or just, nothing huge or nothing big, because they have some bigger pieces, some players that, are some potentially, valuable pieces to contending rosters. I think there are some players on this list. So let's go ahead and talk about this season or this free agency and some of the players that are probably going to be free agents. Some of these players are on player options, so it depends to them if they want to opt in or opt out. But as far as this year, the biggest name out there, or one of the biggest names, not the biggest, but one of the biggest names is Gordon Hayward. It is a player option, so he could opt out or opt in. But this season alone, 17 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists. I think he's somewhat starting to get back to the all-star stride that he was playing at before that big injury. Hasn't quite found himself in Boston quite yet. He does have a whole lot of talent around him, so he is no longer the focal point of the offense, being the number one guy. So that is also why we see the drop in stats. Also has to do with the injury, so multiple factors going in. Either way, a guy who can come in and put in some high valuable minutes, not a number 2 guy, but I think can be a number 3 guy on your roster. Again, for a competing team. So I like where he is in Boston. I think more than likely he opts in because the contract that he has with Boston isn't necessarily promised anything more outside of that. So I bet he opts in, gets his payday from Boston, and then maybe we see him go elsewhere. But I think he'll opt in this season and stay with the Celtics. There's also a guy like Paul Millsap. Hasn't necessarily, he's been a bigger piece for the Denver Nuggets, but not, the number 1 all-star guy, an all-star player we saw him be in Atlanta. I think that player is probably past him. 12 points, 6 rebounds, a guy who can spread the floor with his outside shot. That's who he is nowadays. And there's nothing wrong with that. I would love to see him go to a contending type team. Be a 3-and-D type player who can spread the floor and play some solid defense. So a guy like Paul Millsap is also out there and somewhat ready, out there for the taking. So not a guy you necessarily want to underestimate in Paul Millsap. DeMar DeRozan, also a guy who will most likely be a free agent this year. Hasn't gotten an extension or anything done with the San Antonio Spurs. I don't think they're quite in love with him as a player, but I do think they will extend him because he's one of the better players available, for their team right now. This year, he's averaging 22 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. Not quite the player he was in Toronto ever since the trade to the Spurs. A different team, different system, no longer the number one guy. So I understand, a very team-oriented game plan in San Antonio. We know why his stats have dropped a little bit. Just kind of a shell shock to leave Toronto, So no disrespect for DeMar, not quite the player he was, but still a 20-point-a-night scorer, potentially out there. But we know he's going to want a payday. We know he's going to want somewhat of a max contract. We could see San Antonio, again, lock him up and just keep him around. One of the better players available right now and in the foreseeable future. But I could see him going to a bigger team, somewhat of a smaller, not want to say a smaller market in San Antonio, but yeah, not a huge market, it is a well-known team in the Spurs, but not a flashy market by any means. I think he's from LA. Maybe we see him come to a team in Los Angeles, or more like a team in Los Angeles, but we'll see. I would like to see I'd be okay with him staying in San Antonio. I would be okay with him leaving San Antonio. I don't have too big of an opinion on this move. Either way, he's going to be a free agent. I do think he's going to be one of the more, sought after, one of the guys a lot of teams try to go after this off season. Maybe we see a team like the Knicks, who swung and missed on so many big names. Maybe we see him go and max out a guy like DeMar DeRozan. Who knows? Either way, somewhat chasing a contract in DeMar. Otto Porter Jr. I could very well see him going again to a contending team, being a valuable piece, or I could see him staying in a smaller market team, maybe getting a bigger contract, a bigger role, again, being a bigger role in their offense, getting more minutes, more shots. I could see him doing either way. I would prefer to see him going to more of a contending team, have more of an impact there than on a smaller, lesser of a chance to win team. Really depends on what he's looking after. Is he looking after, personal accolades? Is he chasing a payday? What is he chasing? Or is he looking to win? Okay, really depends on what he's looking for. But Otto Porter Jr., definitely a guy out there, and a guy who's going to be sought after this offseason. Another guy, Nick Batum, okay? He hasn't necessarily panned out the way you wanted him to in Charlotte. But that team, it's not necessarily his fault. That team hasn't been good in years. So not Nick Batum's fault. Of course, I can't blame him for leaving, the Trailblazers, getting the big contract he did get from the Hornets. It's kind of, if they're going to give it to me, why wouldn't I take it? So props to him for getting that big of a contract. Hasn't necessarily panned out the way they wanted it to. But I do think he is an established role player now. He can maybe come off the bench or be your starting small forward. Not a guy you want to rely on, but he can start in this league. He can definitely come off the bench and score. A veteran presence on offense and defense. So Nick Batum, I would love to see him sign on, again, a more of a contending team and see him put in some effort. We saw him get the big payday, the big contract. Let's see him move out of Charlotte onto a bigger market, more relevant team. That's what I would like to see from Nick Batum. Marc Gasol, I would love to see him go to a team like the Golden State Warriors. Also a guy like Serge Ibaka, I would love to see him go to a team like the Warriors. Bigs who can shoot the three ball, spread the floor, and play some quality defense. Just saw them win their first championship together in Toronto. Both guys who I don't think they'll be necessarily chasing the big payday. I think they might just stick around in Toronto. We'll see how this offseason turns out. I think they're going to stay with either Toronto or another contending team, a team that is already pretty much established. I would like to see them stay in Toronto, keep the depth on that team. They simply need to add, not lose guys in Toronto, but who knows? I would love to see them stay or go. Either way, Marc Gasol, Serge Ibaka, both guys who are going to be sought after or chased after this offseason, and rightfully so. Danilo Gallinari, also a guy who is going to be looked after, having basically a career year in OKC, averaging 18 points, I believe 7 or so rebounds per game. So he's having a good year this year. We could see him getting a bigger contract than he would have if he hadn't have had this big season. So maybe he stays in OKC. Maybe they give him the contract he's wanting, and they keep building, through the draft with all the draft picks that they have from the Paul George and Russell Westbrook trades. So maybe they simply keep him around and keep building. But, either way, we could see him going to another contending team. I would love to see that, but for him, see more of a small market, big payday. That's more of what I see in Gallinari's future. Again, I want all of these players to be on contending teams. A lot of them are, but I could see a few of them going and chasing that payday in a smaller market as well. So Gallinari, another decently big free agent he's shown everybody he is a scorer in this league, can score on or off the bench or as a starter. A guy who shouldn't be an underrated guy for sure in Oklahoma City. Tim Hardaway Jr., another guy who, he's been in Dallas. We've seen him on the Knicks. A great shooter. Really can spread the floor for your offense, get some buckets. Like I said, a great 3-point shooter. So I would love to see him sign. I don't think he'll be able to get a big contract. Really kind of depends. I like him in Dallas with Luka and Kristaps spreading the floor even more. So I would like to see him stay in Dallas. Same thing with Fred Van Vliet. I would like to see him stay in Toronto after winning the championship there. I see them kind of maxing him out, and he's going to be there for a long time, I think. Goran Dragic, point guard in Miami. I could very well see him staying in Miami, them giving him a couple-year extension, or I could see him, again, going to a higher market team. Either way with Goran, he's an established point guard. Definitely a guy you want to look out for this offseason. Evan Fournier, a guy who's been in Orlando pretty much all of his career, if not all of his career, a scorer. So it'd be cool to see him in a bigger market, but I think he stays in Orlando. Tristan Thompson, coming off that huge contract. I don't think he's going to get one, like the one he got in the past, probably a smaller one. Does he stay in Cleveland or does he go chase rings with his guy LeBron? Let's see. I think Tristan Thompson leaves Cleveland. Also, a guy like Jordan Clarkson, deserving of a contract. I think he might just stay in Cleveland. They max him out as their Lou Will sixth man coming off the bench. Either way, Jordan Clarkson definitely going to have a contract coming his way. Andre Robertson, another guy who's been injured for a long time, coming back possibly in this bubble. He's been in Oklahoma City for a long time. Does he go to a different team? Does he stay in Oklahoma City? Either way, another free agent. And then last guy I want to talk about, Jay Crowder. Is somewhat of less smaller guy. I want to talk about Jay Crowder. An underrated guy. We saw him be a big piece to that Celtic team ever since. He's kind of just been traded. We saw him get traded to the Grizzlies. I think he's still on the Grizzlies right now. So a guy who's really just been moving around the last couple of years, but he has value, and I would like to see him end up on a more contending team than the Grizzlies, or maybe he stays as a veteran presence on that young team. Either way, there's really one big guy in this free agent market this season, and that's got to be Anthony Davis, okay? And there aren't really a whole lot of options for him, like we saw this past offseason. A lot of guys have taken the cap space on these other contending teams, and there aren't a whole lot of other, spaces left for these superstars. So I think Anthony Davis, his best shot is to stay in LA with, one of the best co-stars possible in LeBron James. He can make the most money, I believe, with the Lakers. Instead of signing the extension, he can simply opt out, sign, as a free agent, get 5 years, get an extra $500 million on top of the contract and an extra year instead of the extension. So it's smart. He doesn't do the extension, simply, opts out and signs as a free agent. As far as other big competitors, you could say the Bulls, because, he's from Chicago, the Illinois area. But, not a contending team in Chicago, not a team who really has a future in place, it seems like. So I don't think it would be a good move for him to leave LA and go to Chicago by any means. So I think the best bet, like I said, you stay in LA with LeBron, you chase as many rings as you can with him. You don't go to your home state quite yet. Let's let Chicago build up for a couple more years. Maybe on that next contract, you go home to Chicago. But I think, like I said, Lakers are the best option. You stay with LeBron in LA, one of the biggest stages, biggest markets, biggest stars in LeBron and your co-star. That equals money, success, and longevity, on those two things as well. So I say he stays in LA. I think it is what he will inevitably do, or end up doing. I would love to hear what you guys think on this topic as well. I want to go ahead and take a quick break, and when I come back, I want to discuss all of the positions in the NBA, point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, center, and my top 3 players at each of those positions. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to be right back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right, guys, welcome back to the final segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Like I said before the break, I want to talk about all of the positions in the NBA and the top 3 players at each of those positions. Without a lot of these, without live games going on right now, a lot of people tend to, bank on or crank out a lot of these lists. Like I've said, Bleacher Report and ESPN, they do a whole lot of them, especially when, they have nothing else really to do. So this is something we see happening a lot. I saw them make one for the NFL, like the top 20 players at each position or something. So I thought, why not? Let's do it for the NBA. But instead of 20, that's a whole lot. Let's do 3 players at each position. So let's start at the point guard position, and the top 3 players at that position. At number 1, I have got to give the edge, put the number 1 point guard, give that role, give that, that achievement, there we go, that's the word I'm looking for, to Steph Curry. I got to give it to Steph. I think he's the best point guard in the league today. He's the most decorated with 2 MVPs, 3 championships. I think he's the best shooter this league has ever seen. He changed the league, and he is the reason we see so many 3-point shots in today's game. So he changed the game, and in my opinion, he is the best point guard in the league today. Damian Lillard, in my opinion, is at that number 2 spot. At least right now, he's at that number 2 spot. We saw him last year go head to head with a Russell Westbrook, beat him, be first team All NBA. We've seen him be second team All NBA. He's an All-Star for the past 6 or 7 years now. He solidified himself as a top 3 point guard in this league, in my opinion. Time to put more respect on the 2K21 cover athlete, Damian Lillard is my second best point guard in the NBA today. At number 3, this was a really tough decision for me, number 3. I decided to give the edge to Russell Westbrook, the triple-double machine. That's also because of his availability. I wanted to put Kyrie Irving on this spot because, the highest level we saw him win the NBA Finals and at his highest level of play. So we don't want to knock him or take anything away from him or doubt him in any way. But availability, Russell Westbrook is the point guard when it comes to availability. He's going to be there pretty much every night, giving you pretty much the same thing. Lots of points, lots of rebounds, lots of assists. So availability, a big part in why I have, Russ at number 3. He's been, an established point guard and MVP winner himself. So Russ is my third best point guard in the league today. Let's move to the shooting guard position, okay? Shooting guards. At number 1, I gotta give it to the beard, James Harden, okay? Last year, we saw him average 35 points, the first since Kobe and MJ to do that. So, an established all-time scorer, James Harden is. He's basically a wizard with the basketball. We've seen him basically, create that step back 3-point shot that is not apparently a travel anymore in the NBA. So he's coined that, almost, invented that move, like the Kareem hook, the MJ Kobe fadeaway. You got James Harden in the step back 3. So James Harden is the number 1 shooting guard, MVP winner. We've seen him in the Western Conference Finals year after year battling those Warriors. He's the best shooting guard in the NBA today. At number 2, I gotta go with Klay Thompson, okay, the two-way guy, one of the best two-way players in the NBA, the best catch-and-shoot player we've ever seen, one of the best shooters we've ever seen. He's part of the best backcourt in NBA history. He has 3 championships himself. He was a large part, an underrated part, but a large part of all of those championships. Klay Thompson is my number 2 shooting guard, my second best shooting guard in the entire NBA, and he deserves more respect on his name than he actually gets. I think he's going to come back better than ever, and when we saw him last in the 2019 finals, that was some of the best basketball I've seen Klay ever play. So I'm predicting, the same to come from Klay. He's the second best shooting guard in the NBA today. At number 3, I go with Bradley Beal, okay? Averaging close to 30 points this season. It's simply because he's in, the Wizards, smaller franchise, not a very, not a contending franchise by any means, somewhat of an irrelevant team at this time. They did get invited to Orlando. Bradley Beal is not playing. He's injured. He's going to sit out and get healthy. When playing, when healthy, I think he's in his peak, just arriving in his peak, and I think he was snubbed of the All-Star achievement this season. Definitely should have been an All-Star over Chris Middleton. Definitely, 30 points to 20 points, just that alone. But he deserved to be an All-Star this year, was snubbed of it. Bradley Beal is my third best shooting guard in the NBA today. Small forwards. Number 1, I go with the King, LeBron James, 17th season, moved positions, still averaging, 10 assists in the league. Career high for him, leading the league in assists. He's second in MVP voting, or in the race right now, so he could very well win the MVP himself. Number 1 seed in the Western Conference, LeBron James. He's the best small forward in the NBA today. Gotta say it. And number 2, when healthy, okay? Kevin Durant is the second best small forward in this league. He's a 7-foot assassin, can shoot at all 3 levels, is a 3-level scorer. Showed in Golden State he can also do it on the defensive side. And he has 2 championships, 2 finals MVPs, a MVP, multiple scoring titles. Kevin Durant is my number 2, my second best small forward in the league today. Number 3, I go with Kawhi Leonard, the reigning finals MVP, has 2 championships, 2 finals MVPs, 2 defensive player of the years. When you think of two-way players, he's arguably the first player to come to mind. What he's doing for the Clippers this season as well, proving his worth, proving whatever team he goes to basically is a title contender from the get-go. Kawhi Leonard is my third best small forward in the league today. Power forward position. Number one, and he's officially ranked as this, so I feel weird putting him as this, but number one, Giannis Antetokounmpo. I thought he was a small forward. Apparently, he's more of a power forward. Either way, he's number one. What he's doing, close to 30 points, 12 rebounds, last year's MVP, could be this year's MVP. Number one seed in the NBA, the Bucks have ranked, very highly on offensive and on the defensive side. So we know what Giannis is doing. He's the anchor. They go as far, in Milwaukee as Giannis goes. Giannis is my number one power forward in the league today. Number two, Anthony Davis. He, in my opinion, is a defensive player of the year this year, averaging 26 points, 9 rebounds, getting a block a game. Again, number one seed in the Western Conference with LeBron and the Lakers. Anthony Davis, new team, highest, brightest stage possible. He's done nothing but shine and prove he belongs in LA. He is a star in this league. He's my second best power forward. Number three, I go with Pascal Siakam, the up and coming, reigning champion, 23.7 rebounds. He's an up-and-coming player for sure. I think he's going to be an all-star for years to come. He proved his worth in Toronto last year, helping them win that championship, seeing them still be the number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference today. In large part, the biggest part to do with Siakam. So he, in my opinion, third best power forward in the league today. And at the center position, number one, the process, trust the process. Joel Embiid is my number one center when he's healthy. That's the biggest knock. Is he going to be on the floor? When he is on the floor, he's my number one center. He can shoot from outside. He can dominate the paint. He can grab rebounds. He can block opponents' shots. A defensive anchor, offensive presence. So he can do it on both sides of the court. He's my number one center in the league. Number two, I got to go with Nikola Jokic. Can pass, rebound, shoot. He is the anchor of that Nuggets team. He's the reason, that young and up-and-coming team in the Nuggets has played so well the past couple of years, has been an MVP candidate in the past couple of years. Nikola Jokic in a smaller market or not as well-known team as the Nuggets. That's why he doesn't get quite the recognition he should. Is an all-star and is my second-best center in the NBA. And at number three, for the center position, I go with Karl Anthony Towns. He can do it on the offensive side, not as much of a defensive anchor quite yet. We haven't seen Minnesota play up to the standard or up to the hopes, how good we were hoping they were going to play. Karl Anthony Towns is obviously the focal point of that team, the leader of that team. They go as far as he will take them. He's been in the playoffs once, had somewhat of a disappointing appearance there. Either way, he's a dominating center, the third best center in this league, in my opinion. I just want to see some more wins in the win-loss column. I want to see more in that win column for Karl Anthony Towns and Minnesota before I move him up on this list. Either way, is an all-star and in the third best center in the league today, in my opinion. Those are my positions. Those are my players. To give you guys my, what I think and how I view all the players in today's game. That kind of gives you an insight onto my brain, how I think and how I process all of these players today. I would love to hear your guys' opinions on my list, and I would love to hear some of your own lists. So leave us a comment. If you enjoyed today's show, I urge you to leave us a comment, on any platform you're listening to, and go check us out on social media. Our Twitter page, Facebook page they are active, so go check them out. And lastly, before I end today's show, I want to thank you all for the continued support at GSMC. Thank you from me, Bryce, Nick, all of us on the Basketball Podcast. Thank you for your continued support. I'm going to be right back here on Thursday. Go ahead and listen to Bryce and Nick's podcast until then, but check me out on Thursday. I'll see you guys then.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.